Israel Adesanya's prediction. Dricus du Plessis vs Khamzat Chimaev UFC 319 middleweight title fight. When it comes to predicting the outcome of high-stakes fights in the UFC, even former champions like Israel Adesanya can't resist putting their money where their mouth is. Adesanya, who once held the middleweight title, is now looking ahead to UFC 319 and offering his take on the upcoming battle between Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev. But here's where it gets controversial. Adesanya, despite his recent string of losses, still believes in du Plessis's ability to secure his third title defense. Stillknox submitted Adesanya in their last encounter at UFC 305, a fight that saw du Plessis successfully defend his belt. As the date for UFC 319 in August approaches, Adesanya took to his YouTube channel during the UFC 318 broadcast to share his thoughts on the upcoming clash. He suggested that du Plessis will ultimately prevail, albeit with a late finish. The last stylebender went on to explain that if Chimaev were to win, it would likely happen early in the fight, perhaps within the first 2 rounds. Adesanya described du Plessis's fighting style as chaotic, noting that it can be both a strength and a weakness. This fight promises to be a wild ride, with du Plessis's unpredictable tactics potentially clashing with Chimaev's aggressive and powerful style. And this is the part most people miss. While the main event at UFC 319 is set to be a thrilling showdown, the co-main event remains a mystery. Rumors suggest that the rescheduled matchup between Aaron Pico and Movsar Evloev might fill this slot, but as of now, it's still up in the air. Stay tuned to MMA Knockout for more in-depth coverage of the UFC, MMA, and boxing. Follow MMA Knockout on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest updates and analysis. So what do you think? Will du Plessis's chaos lead to victory, or will Chimaev's power prove too much to handle? Share your predictions in the comments below. Reinier de Ridder, ready to step in for Chimaev at UFC 319. Imagine this. Reinier de Ridder, a name quickly rising in the UFC ranks, is not just preparing for his own high-stakes fight, but also positioning himself as the ultimate backup plan for one of the most anticipated matchups of the year. That's right, the Dutch Knight is ready to step in for Khamzat Chimaev at UFC 319 if the Chechen star can't make it to the octagon. But here's where it gets interesting. De Ridder, 20-2 MMA, 3-0 UFC, is set to face former UFC middleweight champion Robert Whittaker, 26-8 MMA, 17-6 UFC, in the main event of UFC on ABC 9, scheduled for July 26 at the Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi. This is a massive opportunity for de Ridder to prove he belongs among the elite. However, his ambitions don't stop there. He's also eyeing a potential fight against the winner of the Nassourdine Imavov vs Caio Borralho bout at UFC Paris on September 6. Talk about a busy schedule. I'm leaning towards Imavov in that one just because he's so complete, so relaxed in there, de Ridder told MMA Junkie, offering his prediction for the Imavov vs Borralho fight. He seems to be very much in control, but hopefully it's just a boring fight, and nobody wants to watch, nothing happens. That will be ideal. And this is the part most people miss. De Ridder isn't just hoping for a win for himself. He's strategically considering the landscape of the middleweight division, and how other fights might impact his own trajectory. The former 2 Division 1 championship title holder has made a statement in the UFC by finishing all 3 of his opponents. He understands that another dominant performance against Whittaker is crucial to solidify his claim as a top contender. A simple win won't suffice. He needs a decisive, early, and spectacular finish. Hopefully if I can do well, it all depends on how the fight goes, de Ridder explained. Like a win is not enough. I need to finish him. I need to finish him early, hopefully spectacularly. And as I said, we all hope Imavov and Borralho is boring. Goes 5 rounds, nothing happens. That would be perfect, or maybe Khamzat pulls out last minute, and they give me a call. We'll see. This highlights de Ridder's proactive approach, and his willingness to seize any opportunity that comes his way. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Khamzat Chimaev 14-0 MMA, 8-0. UFC, is slated to challenge middleweight champion Dricus du Plessis, 23-2 MMA, 9-0 UFC. In the main event of UFC 319 on August 16 in Chicago. This is a highly anticipated clash of undefeated records and contrasting styles. But what if Chimaev were to withdraw at the last minute? That's where de Ridder comes in. Entering his 5th fight in less than a year, de Ridder is eager to maintain his momentum and is prepared to step in for Chimaev if needed. I'll be ready to fight again, or as I said, I might be ready to step in last minute if necessary, de Ridder stated. So, we'll see what happens. Weighing in is the hardest part, so hopefully not weighing in at all. We'll see. He's willing to be the ultimate substitute, but understandably, he'd prefer to avoid the grueling weight cut if possible. But here's where it gets controversial. Some might argue that de Ridder is being opportunistic, while others will commend his dedication and readiness. Is it fair for a fighter to actively hope for another's misfortune to advance their own career? So what do you think? Is Reinier de Ridder making the right move by positioning himself as a potential replacement for Khamzat Chimaev? Is it a smart career strategy, or does it come across as disrespectful to the other fighters involved? And who do you think will win between de Ridder and Whittaker? Share your thoughts and predictions in the comments below. UFC 319 Chicago. Dricus du Plessis vs Khamzat Chimaev. Full main card revealed. Imagine the adrenaline rush as UFC 318 concludes, and the spotlight swiftly shifts to the next big event in the mixed martial arts world. UFC 319, set to take place in Chicago, Illinois, on August 16th. The excitement from the Smoothie King Center in New Orleans, where UFC 318 showcased thrilling matchups, is still fresh in our minds. Highlights included Max Holloway and Paulo Costa's impressive victories, Dustin Poirier's retirement celebration, and crucial wins for Daniel Rodriguez, Patricio Pitbull, and Michael Johnson. But here's where it gets controversial. While the aftermath of UFC 318 is still buzzing, the focus is already shifting to the upcoming pay-per-view event, UFC 319. This event promises to be just as electrifying, with the BMF title and middleweight championship conversations heating up. At the United Center in Chicago, Dricus du Plessis will defend his middleweight title against Khamzat Chimaev. Du Plessis secured the belt from Sean Strickland at UFC 297, and successfully defended it against Israel Adesanya and Strickland at UFC 305 and UFC 312, respectively. Chimaev earned his title shot with a brutal finish of former champion Robert Whittaker at UFC 308 last year. And this is the part most people miss. The main card for UFC 319 has been announced, but as of now, there is no listed co-main event. This leaves room for speculation and anticipation about who might step up to fill this crucial spot. Before the main event, several fighters will be looking to make their mark on the main card. Jeff Neal will face off against the rising welterweight contender Carlos Prates. Neal recently snapped a 2-fight losing streak with a TKO win over Rafael dos Anjos in just 90 seconds due to injury. Prates, a member of the Fighting Nerds, will be aiming to bounce back from his April loss to Paddy Pimblett, which was his first defeat in the UFC. Former middleweight title challenger Jared Cannonier will also be in action, taking on Michael Venom Page. Like Neal, Cannonier ended a 2-fight skid with a finish over Gregory Robocop Rodriguez in February. MVP returned to middleweight in his most recent fight, securing a decision win over Shera Magomedov at UFC Saudi Arabia in February. The main card is set to kick off with a battle between former flyweight title challengers Tim Elliott and Kai Asakura. This will be Elliott's first fight in over a year and a half due to injury. His most recent bout was a bantamweight submission win over Sue Maderji in December 2023. Asakura, the former risen bantamweight champion, challenged Alexander Pantoja for the flyweight title in his UFC debut at UFC 310, losing via submission. These pairings have been confirmed for the main card, while fighters like King Green, Jessica Andrade, and Edson Barboza are expected to feature on the preliminary card. Here is the current lineup for UFC 319. Main card, Middleweight Championship. Dricus du Plessis vs Khamzat Chimaev TBA weight class. TBA vs TBA welterweight. Jeff Neal vs Carlos Prates middleweight. Jared Cannonier vs Michael Page flyweight. Tim Elliott vs Kai Asakura preliminary card, bout order TBA lightweight. King Green vs Diego Ferreira middleweight. Gerald Mearschert vs Michael Oleksichuk women's strawweight. Jessica Andrade vs Lupi Godinez lightweight. Chase Hooper vs. Alexander Hernandez lightweight. Edson Barboza vs. Drakkar close middleweight. Brian Battle vs. Nursultan Rizaboev women's flyweight. Karine Silva vs. JJ Aldrich. Now, let's discuss. Do you think the absence of a co-main event will affect the overall excitement of UFC 319? Who do you predict will step up to fill this crucial spot? Share your thoughts in the comments below.